So good evening, everyone. And welcome to the Air Pollution Control District's Clearing the Air workshop. I'm Michelle King. I'm APCD's Assistant Director, and I'm here to kick off tonight's workshop and introduce our speaker, Bradley Coombs. Bradley is an environmental coordinator at APCD and has been working with us for more than 12 years, bringing air quality and land use policy together in programs like APCD's Grow More, Mow Less, and Lawn Care for Cleaner Air initiatives. And this evening, we're here celebrating Louisville Tree Week. We're taking a look at how trees and vegetation help us all breathe easier while bringing lots of other benefits too. So there's a lot of reasons to keep Louisville leafy, and we're looking forward to exploring those with you tonight. Tonight's workshop is being recorded, so we are starting off with our attendees muted. But once the presentation recording is complete, we'll be opening the floor and we'll invite you to ask questions and share your thoughts. The workshop video and the presentation slides will be posted to our website afterward for additional viewing. And so just a little bit about our workshop series. We developed this Clearing the Air workshop concept in order to provide opportunities for us to share the district's work with our community, improving our collective understanding of Louisville's air quality and how it's regulated, and also empowering people with information and insights into this important aspect of our city's environment and health. Our aim is to provide a more informal setting for sharing information and have an open discussion, as compared to the more formal settings that occur during our board's monthly meetings or in a public hearing that are bound by regulatory requirements. As such, after the presentation, again, we hope that you'll stick around and join us for some Q&A and discussion of this really important topic. And so first, a few quick webinar tips. Again, we're going to start this webinar with our attendees muted, but you'll be able to interact directly with us during the discussion portion. You can drop questions in the chat at any time if something comes to mind and you don't want to forget. We'll start there when we get to the Q&A portion, but you can also wait and ask those in person too. And if you think of a question after you leave, please feel free to email it to us later at air@louisvilleky.gov. Pretty easy to remember. Lastly, remember there are no silly questions here. And please share the air with your other attendees if there's lots of folks that want to join in and ask some questions. And then lastly, we would really love to know if you have feedback on this workshop or ideas for more workshops in the future. We want to hear from you. But now let's get on to tonight's topic. Keep Louisville leafy, the impact of trees and vegetation on air quality. So with that, over to you, Bradley.
Thanks, Michelle. Like Michelle said, my name is Bradley Coombs. I'm an environmental coordinator with the district. And tonight we'll be talking all about the impact of trees and vegetation on air quality. So just start off with a few tree statistics. I won't read all of these to you, but a couple that really stick out to me are that you were to plant a tree today on the west side of your home, in about 5 years, your energy bill should be 3% less. In 15 years, you could see savings of nearly 12%. Also, street trees, because of where they are in proximity to, sources that emit pollution, could be up to 10 times as effective as forest trees for lowering carbon dioxide. So while it's really important to plant trees, it's also really important where we plant trees when we decide to combat issues such as urban heat island, air pollution, greenhouse gases, all those types of things. A few more tree statistics. These have to do with the value of urban parks trees in the U.S. It is estimated that urban park trees in the U.S., the value could be around $300 billion, with air pollution reduction values in the ballpark of $500 million per year. The value in those trees' ability to store carbon, that's valued in the ballpark of about 1.5 or $6 billion. And those trees can remove up to 75,000 tons of pollution per year. Here is just a little diagram, sort of talking about one of those stats we just talked about a couple of minutes ago about strategically planting trees around your home. Um, Deciduous trees planted on the west and south sides can help buildings with providing shade and lowering cooling costs, while evergreen trees planted on the northern side of your home can help block winds in the winter and actually, keep your home a little bit warmer. So just the strategic placing of different types of trees around your property can make you not have to run your HVAC system less, which means you save money and you also use less electricity, which means less pollution. And speaking of pollution, what we have here is a list of what we call the criteria pollutants. These are the most sort of common pollutants that we as an agency combat. Some of the most common ones here that we have issues with are ground level ozone and particulate matter. Speaking of ozone, this next slide shows that ozone is not a pollutant that is it comes out directly in like the exhaust of a car or comes directly out of a smokestack. Ozone is created when nitrous oxides meet volatile organic compounds in the presence of sunlight and heat, and that chemical reaction creates ozone. When you hear about an air quality alert day here in Jefferson County, we're usually talking about ozone. So, here is where I can talk a little bit about the different ways in which trees can actually help remove, some of that pollution from the air. And that's done usually in three different ways. The first is called dispersion. And that's actually where, trees or other vegetation create like a screen so that pollution hits that plant material, decreasing the chance that those pollutants will actually reach people and be inhaled. Deposition, on the other hand, is where particulate matter types of pollution, they get trapped on the leaves of plant material and then washed away by rain. And then absorption is different than the other two. That's when trees and plants actually absorb gaseous pollutants such as sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides, carbon monoxide, ground level ozone. So you can see that, depending on where trees are planted, what types of trees are planted, they can do a lot to cut down on the amount of pollution that actually reaches us. And over on the right, you'll see I added a little note about the Green Heart Project, and there's a link here. That's a local project if you all are not familiar. It's a study going on in a neighborhood kind of near the south end, which is of Louisville, which is studying the impact of increased greenery, exactly what we're talking about, trees and vegetation in a neighborhood on human health. So that's an ongoing study, and we'll look kind of toward the future for results from that. Moving on a little bit here, wanted to talk about urban heat island, or UHI. And urban heat island is a condition in which urban areas which have a lot of concrete and impervious surfaces, buildings, basically lots of surfaces where heat can collect, and then those materials kind of hold on to heat. So you get this sort of unnatural phenomenon where all these impervious surfaces attract all of this heat, and and then have a hard time releasing that back up into the atmosphere. You can see on the graphic here to the left, you've got sort of starting at asphalt on the left, which is kind of like the worst surface for UHI, because not only is it impervious, but it's also very dark, so it attracts lots of heat, all the way over to large trees, which would be kind of the best case scenario, because um, large trees, they don't attract that heat like that. They're very good at releasing heat back up into the atmosphere. So there's a whole wide range of surfaces and plant material there. So here in these pictures, you've just got some examples of heat island mitigation. So just different examples of plantings where there would normally be impervious surfaces. So you can fit plantings into parking lots. You can convert the rooftop of buildings into green spaces. You can plant shade trees that partly or all the way sort of give shade in parking lots. There's a lot of different ways we can plant all kinds of trees and vegetation to help combat UHI. And some of our other benefits of trees that don't really have to do with air pollution, but trees help to reduce stormwater runoff, and they also filter pollutants from storm and groundwater. Studies have shown that trees help keep us safe. A well-developed canopy helps to reduce vandalism, reduce crime levels, and helps to build community. Trees enhance our well-being by reducing noise pollution and reducing stress. They encourage outdoor recreation and improve patient recovery times. In a study done, actually in multiple studies done, that showed improved patient recovery times when patients recovering in hospitals could see trees and other vegetation from their windows, as opposed to just parking lots and other impervious surfaces. And trees strengthen our economy. They actually do a lot to increase property values. Another really good way of using trees and vegetation is putting in roadside vegetative buffers. And what I've got here is a local example of a roadside buffer that was installed at St. Margaret Mary Catholic Community on Shelbyville Road. If you're familiar with Oxmoor Center, it's kind of right across the street from there. They put in a lot of plantings along Shelbyville Road that created, just as it says, a vegetative buffer between the noise and the pollution and all that traffic right on Shelbyville Road, between the road there and the school and church behind. And according to the design laboratory who worked with the community there to design the study, in certain conditions, particulate pollution was lowered 60% when studied immediately behind that buffer or biofilter. So some really promising results from that study, showing a good reduction in pollution behind it next to a busy road like that. Another local / regional example here is the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet is in the middle of a project where they are planting pollinator plots, like large pollinator gardens along Kentucky highways. So in total, over the next few years, they are going to reach up to 230 acres of pollinator gardens along the sides of Kentucky highways. So, that will reduce the amount of mowing that needs to happen on those roadsides. So that will, not only will that reduce the amount of pollution done by mowing, but certain forms of vegetation can also help mitigate the impact of vehicle emissions. The project will consist of over 100 locations, and the project will also be implemented in all new highway builds in Kentucky moving forward. So when we talk about, so far we've, talked a lot about how trees and vegetation can help, but, you hear a lot about using the best types of trees and the best types of plant materials. And usually we talk about natives. And, you may be asking, what's the difference between planting something that's not native versus native? And there's a few really basic reasons. The benefits of native plants are typically that they're one, a lot lower maintenance. Native plants are plants that are meant to grow in these conditions, so they don't require as much sort of maintenance and upkeep as plants that are sort of transplanted from a different location. Also, just the beauty of native plants. Plants that are native to here, they flower in the spring, they produce colorful fruits, and they change with the seasons. They provide healthy places for people and pets. When I say healthy, I mean, they don't typically require a lot of artificial fertilizers and chemical pesticides, herbicides, again, because they're, plants and trees that are meant to be here in our climate. They fight climate change. Planting native trees and plants reduces mowing, and many native trees, such as oaks and maples, are really great at storing carbon dioxide. They conserve water because they're adapted to local environmental conditions. And of course, they provide wildlife for native habitat, native pollinators. So just a few examples of trees and plants you may or may not be familiar with. So trees, black walnut, Kentucky coffee tree, pawpaw, which seems to be kind of over the last several years really gaining a lot of popularity. I think, there was even a local pawpaw festival, I think, a few weeks back. And, Kentucky State University does a lot of research with the native pawpaw tree. So just plants, you get chokeberry, Kentucky clover, which is not a weed. It's the clover, it's ground cover. Little blue stem, lots of examples. So another thing I wanted to touch on this evening was some of you may be familiar with this quote weed ordinance issue that's been going on locally for a long time. For many years here locally, residents were cited and sometimes even fined for having plant growth in their yard that exceeded 10 inches. That plant growth was often considered to be weeds. The people who were enforcing this rule were sometimes confused about what was weeds and what wasn't, and really the language in the code was kind of ambiguous and left a lot of people sort of frustrated. So last year, Metro Council finally passed a new weed ordinance that is a lot more specific, and it allows what they call managed natural landscapes. So that can include native plants, meadow vegetation, prairies, rain gardens, among many other things. Essentially, I didn't, just write down the ordinance word for word here, but the language is a lot more specific. It's way less vague. It gives very detailed instructions about how these plantings are supposed to be set back from property lines, and how you have to, do edging or fencing around these different types of plantings. And it seems to, at least in my experience, it seems to have alleviated a lot of the issues. I used to, I administer our Grow More, Mow Less program, and I would periodically get calls from residents who are frustrated by this quote weed ordinance, and so I haven't really gotten any calls since this went into effect. So I think that hopefully this has cleared up a lot of that ambiguity for people and has allowed people to grow a lot a lot of different things in their yards that they want to. I would be remiss if we didn't talk tonight about tree equity and what it means to have a well-developed tree canopy over for your whole community. Unfortunately, not all communities have the same tree canopy coverage. Many urban areas lack the necessary coverage that suburbs and rural areas enjoy. So naturally, areas without a decent canopy are going to see bigger urban heat island problems, and that can lead to, unfortunately, bad health outcomes for people who live there. There's a website here called treeequityscore.org where you can find out more about sort of what goes into this, and also to kind of figure out your community's tree equity score. So here's a little bit of information about our tree canopy here in Louisville, and overall we're not doing too badly, but like I just mentioned in the last slide, unfortunately, there are parts of our community that are seriously lacking in tree canopy and are made up primarily of impervious surfaces. So those parts of town end up becoming just way hotter than, if you look at this map, you'll see the dark green areas have lots of canopy, which means lots of shade. The pink areas are mainly impervious surfaces. So, the folks that live in those areas just don't have access to the canopy that other people in the community do. So, that's a problem that we're going to have to address. And some of you may be aware, maybe not, that the USDA Forest Service has awarded Louisville Parks and Recreation a $12 million grant to improve the city's tree canopy. So Louisville will receive the funds over the next 5 years, and it will for what the city is calling the Equitable Forest Initiative. Essentially, that initiative is an approach to growing an equitable urban canopy for underserved communities in Louisville, addressing those issues we just talked about in the last slide. And part of that is planning on planting 5,000 trees over the next 5 years. The grant will also allow the city to develop a public tree inventory and management plan, tree planting and maintenance in underserved neighborhoods, community outreach, and also the creation of a green industry workforce development program. And all of this is pretty new. The city just received this grant within the past, I think it's just in the past few weeks. So, I'm really excited to see if we can really take this problem and meet it. So, time will tell, but I'm really optimistic. So, and like I mentioned earlier, I do administer our Grow More, Mow Less program. Most of you are probably familiar with that program, but if you're not, it's essentially just an outreach and education initiative that tries to inform people that how they could, reduce the amount of just regular turf grass that they have in their yard and replace that with other types of plant materials that just don't need as much or any mowing. So that could be any number of things. That could be trees, shrubs, wildflower patches, raised beds, any number of things that kind of options are sort of limitless there with what you could replace your kind of regular turf grass yard with. And when we talk about how much, you have to mow, you can kind of see here on this slide that we talk about there's very high maintenance yards, which of course the upkeep for those yards means lots of emissions if you're having to mow all of that. So that can kind of go down the scale to low mow, where you've got kind of a mix of regular turf grass and lots of plantings, all the way down to where you have very little or no turf grass in your yard at all. And it's a wide range of possibilities. Having a little bit of grass left in your yard might be right for some people, and having none is right for others. It kind of just depends on your preference. So again, here's just lots of these pictures just are showing lots of different ways you can quote grow more, and that's plantings in a parking lot that can provide shade and also provide a little bit of maybe help with collecting storm water. Up on the upper right here, you see, I don't know if that's a school or maybe like a business campus, but they have some very tall kind of prairie grass there instead of like a regular turf grass yard. Down in the bottom middle, you can see a large area of flowers growing on a roadside of a highway there. And then on the bottom right, you'll see your kind of a typical like Louisville shotgun home with that slanting front yard that comes down towards the sidewalk. And if y'all have ever tried to mow one of those, it's a pain. So it's pretty common to see people replace the grass there on that hill with other types of ground covers or plant material. These are some of the organizations that Grow More Mow Less partners with on different initiatives and projects. So keep your eye out for these organizations. They do great work. And got this screen here as a contact list. So if you need to reach me, or I've got the phone number here for just the general APCD office on here. Grow More Mow Less is Facebook and websites on here, and I threw in this picture here of what we call a mulch volcano. And when you see mulch that's really piled up around the base of a tree like that, we call those mulch volcanoes. And that's actually a big no-no. Lots of landscaping companies like to really pile the mulch up high around the tree base like that, but that's actually really bad for the tree. That can cause the base of the tree to always stay damp and rot. You don't do that. You keep the mulch at kind of ground level around the base of the tree, and then going out from there, kind of the edge of the mulch, you pile that a little bit around the outside ring, and that actually forces rainwater to drain down toward the base of the tree. But then that water gets absorbed by the ground and the roots. You don't get the damp mulch piled up against the base like that, which, like I said, can cause the base of the tree to rot. So don't want that. And that's all for me. I'm going to hand this back over to Michelle for just some closing comments, and then should have plenty of time for questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Bradley. Trees truly are remarkable assets for Louisville, and they're really an important part of a healthy city. We're glad that we were able to be a part of Tree Week 2023. Before we switch gears to discussion, I do just have a couple of more items to note for you all. First, when we share tonight's presentation online, you'll find additional resources hyperlinked throughout, from partner programs and community resources to additional air quality information. We hope this presentation itself can be a resource for you to explore further. And then lastly, I'd like to invite you all to stay in touch with us, either on social media like Facebook or X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, or by signing up for our email list. That way you'll be sure to see Clearing the Air workshop series that with some additional topics coming up later this fall. So with that, we're going to end our presentation recording and transition into a time for